Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work and life in a more successful and sustainable way. If being a working mum has left you feeling exhausted, flat, foggy or frankly fed up, then this episode of the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast is for you. Today we're talking about hormones. Many of us women experience the havoc that hormones can have on our life. Maybe the monthly mood swings, maybe heavy bleeding or premenstrual syndrome or skin breakouts, to name but a few symptoms. And you've probably thought that this monthly misery is just part of the package of being a woman. Because we've been taught to think that that's the way it's supposed to go every month, we tend to put up with these symptoms instead of treating them, unless they develop into a more serious condition that needs medical attention, which is what happened to me. These symptoms can not only affect our productivity, but the quality of our life and the quality of the life of those close to us. And that's why I can't wait for us to dive into this episode with my guest, Nikki Williams, who's the founder of Happy Hormones for Life. Nikki is an award-winning nutritionist, author, speaker, and women's health expert, and she helps women to get back to their absolute best. They're more energized, more productive, slimmer, and in control of their hormones. After failing to find any medical help for her own symptoms of exhaustion, weight gain, and hormone issues after having her 2 children, Nikki discovered that she could turn things around using diet, lifestyle, and natural supplements. And she went on to qualify as a nutritional therapist and hormone expert. And Nikki now helps women all over the world with her online programs, workshops, and individual and group coaching. And in this episode, Nikki and I explore some brilliant stuff. So we talk about actually what are hormones, what's their purpose, what should balanced hormones look and feel like. She talked about what kind of hormone-friendly foods to eat. She even shared her top 5 supplements, and she shared so many nuggets of wisdom that if you struggle with your hormones in any way, you're going to love this episode. So I won't keep you waiting any longer. Let's dive into this conversation with Nikki. So welcome, Nikki, to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show. I can't wait to dive into our conversation around hormones, because I think any woman listening to this will at some point, if not most points in their life, have a particular relationship with their hormones. So welcome.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
So could you tell me a little bit about you and what you do for those that may not have heard of you and your work?
Yeah, so I'm a qualified registered nutritionist. I'm an author, speaker, and I am the founder of Happy Hormones for Life. And what we do is we help women with their hormones, but also with other aspects of their health as well. So we're looking at hormone imbalances, but we're also looking at gut problems and the whole works, because you can't really isolate, the body into just different sections. The body talks to it, it works as a whole thing. So we help women basically feel better, lose a bit of weight if they want to, balance their moods, get their brains working again so they're not so foggy, and generally just feel better and sleep better and have better digestion and all of that, because we know that when women are at their best, everyone around them benefits from that.
Oh, I love that. That's really powerful and how true. So obviously we're talking about this Happy Hormones for Life approach. Can you tell me a bit about how it came about? Because I think your story, people might be able to really resonate with and understand that journey to kind of set up this organisation.
Yeah, well, I may be knowledgeable now, but I certainly wasn't a few years ago. So I was working in corporate for many, many years, and I had my 2 children, and I had my second at around my mid-30s, 35. And then at around 42, I went back to corporate after my kids, and around the age of 42, between 40 and 42, everything after 40 kind of just went downhill for me. I started getting absolutely exhausted. I was juggling, obviously, a family, young kids, and a busy role, very responsible role. And every day felt like I was walking through treacle, just trying to get through the day. I was just surviving and just coping with all the stuff I had to do. And it just felt, my brain was foggy. I was putting on weight, that the old diets weren't working anymore. I had, really, really bad moods where, I would shout at my kids and be really horrible to my husband. And, I really didn't like who I'd become. And I didn't know what was going on. So I went to my doctor and I said, look, I don't know what's going on. I am not myself. I am shouting at everyone. I don't like this person. What's going on? And he just looked at me. Obviously, we have 10 minutes with the doctor, don't we? And he looked up and he just gave me a prescription. He didn't even speak to me. He gave me a prescription and it said Prozac on it, which was the antidepressant of the day. And I looked down and thought, well, hang on a minute. I'm not depressed. I might be upset about all this, but I don't feel depressed. And he said, well, that's all we've got and it'll make you feel better. So from that point on, I was like, well, hang on a minute. Is this it? What, really? So lucky for me, I still have a father who is a doctor. He's very much a sort of natural health doctor. He prefers kind of diet, lifestyle supplements to the drug approach, although he will obviously use drugs when he can or when he has to. But so I didn't want to talk to him about all this. It was a bit embarrassing, really, and I didn't really understand what he did anyway. I thought it was a bit what he did, really, and never really talked to him about it. It was never on my radar to kind of go into kind of health and hormones and stuff. I didn't really know anything about it. And when I spoke to him, I said, look, my doctor wants to put me on these antidepressants. And he goes, no, Nick, you're 42. It'll be your hormones. And I went, what do you mean? He goes, well, you're in perimenopause. And I said, what? This is 10 years ago. So that word wasn't kind of being talked about back then. Nobody was talking about this stuff. So I just went, what did you say, menopause? What the hell? I'm only 42. What are you talking about? And he said, well, you're obviously not going to believe me, so we'll get you tested. So I ran a whole series of hormone tests that weren't available on the NHS. We did them privately. And I was just astounded. I was pretty much out of balance in every single hormone that he tested. So I was like, well, hang on, how has this happened? And he said, well, have you been looking after your hormones? I said, I don't even know what that means, but probably not, because I've been, eating what I want and drinking probably a little bit too much and not taking anything, etc. So he basically said, right, you're at the age now, you can't get away with all that stuff anymore. You've got to look after your hormones and your health generally, and this is what you need to do. And he told me the nutrients I needed, the foods I needed to be eating, the supplements I needed to be on, the lifestyle things, I needed to start managing my stress. Even though I didn't really feel it, he said, yeah, you've had 2 kids and you've got a job and, you're under a lot of stress, etc. So by the time I put in place some of these, not even all of them, but some of these changes, they weren't really difficult ones either. They were simple things, but I had no knowledge of, what those things would do. Within a few weeks, my brain fog lifted, my energy came back, my moods balanced out. And I even started to lose a bit of weight around that belly area, which was the bit, the really stubborn stuff. And I couldn't believe the effectiveness of this. I said, well, I haven't even taken any drugs or anything. He goes, no, you don't need to. And within a few weeks, like I said, I'd noticed the changes and started to feel the benefits. And at that point, I went, whoa, hang on a minute. All my friends were in kind of similar situations, all sort of struggling a little bit with various things. And I thought, hang on, why don't we women know about this stuff? We're not taught about our hormones. We don't learn this stuff at school. There's no books on it that I knew of. And, you go on Google and kind of, you just get overwhelmed with all the stuff on there. So I thought I need to know more about this. I sort of got really fascinated about how, the gap in the education for women of this. So I actually got more and more fascinated, ended up ditching my corporate job and going back to college and spending the next 4 years studying nutrition and hormones. And that was I graduated in 2014. So since then, I've set up the business and we've got now a team of nutritionists working for us. And we use the best tests in the world. And we are doing really well because the demand is there. Women are really, really they need this information because they need to be educated, they need to be inspired and motivated and most of all empowered to make changes and really understand how their hormones work at any age, really.
Well, I'm sorry that you've had that experience, but it is amazing to hear the journey you've gone on and how you're now helping other women, because I think many, many people listening to this will go, I don't know how to look after my hormones. And many of us have probably either suffered in silence or suffered and just assumed it's part of being a woman. And, we have to endure these symptoms. So I think what you're going to share today is going to be so incredibly powerful. So we're talking about hormones. but what actually is a hormone?
And that's the first thing I learned. And I was astounded when I went and really learned about hormones, that there were so many of them. First of all, there's, we can probably name a few, can't we? Estrogen and cortisol maybe, and testosterone. But actually there are over 100 of them running around our bodies. And they're actually little chemical messengers that go to every single cell in our body and tell the cells what to do. So they're really, really important. Every single hormone has its own job to do. So it's not surprising as we get older that, things can go a bit wrong. So that's pretty much essentially what hormones do, and they're incredibly important. And I think we underestimate them because we often think of just puberty, pregnancy, menopause, and your cycle as being kind of hormonally related. But actually, hormones regulate your energy, your appetite, your metabolism, your sleep, your detoxification. They do so much in the body that we're not even aware of.
And so I know you talk about kind of the hormone journey that we go on as women, and I think it's something that we probably all experience, but we may never have been educated properly on it. So at a high level, would you mind just kind of outlining what is the kind of general hormone journey that we go on as women?
Absolutely. So from your first period, you're in the puberty, you're in the reproductive phase of your life. So that will go whenever you start your first period, right up to around, and I'm talking very generally here because there's obviously different situations for different women, but generally it's around the age of 35 when your hormones start to change because your egg reserve starts to run out. And that's, evolutionary. And obviously women are having babies longer than that, but that's a kind of general guide. So from 35 onwards, you enter this kind of transition phase called the perimenopause. And that goes right up to postmenopause, which is a year after your final period. And so if you think about it, if you start at around 35 and the average age of your final period is around 52, that can be about 17 years where you may be having certain symptoms. 80% of us will probably have symptoms of some kind, ranging from pretty mild to debilitating, depending on who you are and what you've been through and your lifestyle, your diet, your genetics, and all of that. So it can be that transition phase can be quite a long one. And, if you're listening to this and you're under 35, you really need to know about the perimenopausal journey, because that's when really symptoms really can kick in. And if you've got hormone imbalances under 35, you really need to address them before you get to that transition stage, because that obviously, if you're already imbalanced, it's going to make that journey a little bit worse.
Yeah, and the reason that I wanted to interview you and talk about this is from the age of 13, I've had a hormone imbalance that at the time wasn't, from when I first started my periods, wasn't given any attention. And I was just put on contraception at 13 to, I suppose, block the unhelpful symptoms. And it wasn't until my mum died of a hormone-induced breast cancer, and my nan had also died of breast cancer, that my doctor said, I think it's wise for you to come off the contraceptive pill, which I did. And then, of course, all my symptoms came back. And so it wasn't until I was kind of in my late 20s that I started to really recognise this hormone imbalance. And then over the past, I suppose, 13 or 14 years, have spent a lot of time experiencing the downside of that. And it wasn't until it's got to serious medical situations that I've actually had to go out and go on the journey that you've gone on, really, because the implications were so serious. And at that time, nobody ever talked to me about perimenopausal. I'd heard the term menopause, and I think that's becoming a more popular term, but I still think the perimenopause isn't really spoken about that much.
Oh, that's interesting, actually, because obviously in my world, I hear it everywhere. So
yeah.
It's interesting to see whether that's getting, filtering down into the general public. But I think it is getting more and more prevalent, but and more people are talking about it. But yeah, like you say, it may not be totally common knowledge just yet.
So what kind of symptoms can we expect from the perimenopause? What would be kind of normal signs that, actually, we might be entering that phase?
So it's anything from general things like, obviously, fatigue, mood swings, which you may have, to a certain extent already, but in perimenopause, these things just get exacerbated. So fatigue, mood swings, brain fog, PMS might be worse. You might start getting irregular periods. They may be heavier or more painful. They may be shorter. we've also, you can also get hot flushes and night sweats, although those are, the classic symptoms of menopause that actually a lot of women don't even have anything like that. So you may have more anxiety, depression, stress, sort of overwhelm, that feeling, more emotional. So you kind of tear up at the slightest thing. You often feel, obviously weight gain is another classic, especially around the belly area. And often women say to me that they just feel very flat, that they've lost their mojo, they've lost their motivation, just can't seem to get excited about very much. The joy is sort of gone. And then of course you've got all the sexual side of things as well: low libido, dryness, just not feeling like it at all. So there are lots and lots of symptoms, over 30 to 40 odd, that I could go through, but those tend to be the main ones that people really struggle with.
And I think that's really useful to know, because for some people listening, this might be a time in their life where they've become mums and they're feeling overwhelmed anyway, and they just put it down to, I'm a busy working mum, of which that might be part of it. But actually there might be something else going on that is contributing to that. So I think that's really useful for people listening to hear. So many women may have had the experience, like I had, of being on kind of a hormone interfering contraception for quite a large part of their life before having children, and may not be used to a natural cycle. So if such a thing exists as a typical or natural cycle, would you mind sharing what kind of you would expect that to be?
Now, it is interesting actually, because a lot of women say to me, I've had a weird cycle all my life, or I've had PMS all my life, but that's just normal, isn't it? And I'm like, well, no, it might be common, but it's certainly not normal. It's a sign that your body isn't in balance, something's off, and it's telling you need to kind of address it or do something about it. So where we think things are quite normal because we see, because it's so common, it just doesn't mean that it's right and you're good, you're good to go, because those sorts of things we really need to be taking notice of. So a natural cycle is, your day, you'll have your period, and then the first 2 weeks are your ovulatory phases, and that's when your estrogen gets produced, and then you ovulate in the middle, somewhere around day 14ish, and then you go into the luteal phase in the second half of your week, of your month, and that is when the progesterone kicks in and your womb gets ready for a fertilized egg, etc. And if it's not fertilized, then that lining sheds, and then you start all over again. And typically it runs at 28 days roughly. A lot of women are showing up with luteal phase defects, we call them, which is a shorter luteal phase, and that can mean your whole cycle is a little bit shorter. And then often we get longer cycles. So typically with something like PCOS, you might be running up to about 6 weeks. And obviously most women have some sort of PMS type symptoms, which is a result of that typically a week before your period. That is when your estrogen and progesterone are starting to plummet, and that can cause the symptoms, the mood swings, the bloating, the fatigue and the cravings that often women get at that time. So depending on how, mild symptoms are nothing to worry about, but, the more sort of severe those symptoms are, the more imbalanced the hormones and the cycle can be. So it's something that your cycle absolutely responds really, really well to nutrients and less stress. Those are the two big things. So diet and stress are really important for a very balanced cycle. So there are lots and lots of things you can do to balance out your cycle if you're suffering from those menstrual types of symptoms.
Brilliant. And I know that we're going to be diving down a bit more into that. But before we do, I just wanted to clarify a couple of points, because you've used the term PMS several times, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, and I'm sure they do. But also, I know we used to call it PMT, and it's now PMS. And I was wondering if you could just explain what is meant by that, and perhaps the difference between PMT and PMS, if there is one.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure when it changed over actually, but in my world we call it PMS, and I think the GPs now call it PMS as well, because PMS is premenstrual syndrome. So it describes a whole set of symptoms that can happen in that run up to your period, whereas PMT is premenstrual tension, and I think that just limits it a little bit because obviously there's more than just tension going on. So I think that's possibly why the term changed. But it's pretty much the same thing. We all know pretty much what, and it could be very different for each woman. Every woman's unique in their cycle, so you may experience a different type of PMS than someone else. So it is what it is for you, but it is an indication that things aren't quite in balance, and there's definitely things you can do to get rid of it.
Perfect. And I know you also mentioned PCOS, and as somebody that suffers with it, I know what it is, but would you mind just explaining what's meant by that?
Yes, and that's polycystic ovarian syndrome. Again, it's a syndrome, so it's a set of symptoms, and it relates to polycystic. Well, you don't have to have polycystic ovaries, but that's one of the indications of it. And it has quite a few different causal factors. So when we help women with PCOS, we're looking at things like inflammation, we're looking at androgens. So not just excess testosterone, because you can have completely normal testosterone, but the testosterone may be metabolizing in a very androgenic way, which means that you may have symptoms like facial hair or aggression, and or hair falling out and things like that. And the other factor for PCOS is insulin as well. So blood sugar is incredibly important as well. So we look at all different aspects of PCOS, because once you find the root cause of it, the likely cause of it, then you can get to the solution pretty quickly. And we've helped women reverse their PCOS in several situations. So depending on, and we use testing for that. We can test for what's happening, which area of the body is causing the PCOS or the syndrome. So once we know that, we can get to the root cause and treat it much more easily and quickly.
Brilliant. Thank you for clarifying that. So we've talked about what a hormone is, but when we're talking about kind of happy hormones for life, would you mind talking about kind of the array of hormones that we're looking at here? Because I know you talk specifically about the feisty four, and it would be really useful just to get a bit of a picture about the hormones that we're looking at here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I talked about the fact that we've got, over 100 hormones, when I was studying all these hormones and what they did, there were four that really stood out for me. And I've called them the feisty four because these four, I think they tend to manage our energy, mood, weight, and brain. And how it works. So these four are critical. And going through all ages, these are the ones that really tend to have the biggest impact in my view. So we're talking, the first one is cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And this is one of the most important hormones that we need to address. You can do it through diet, but most of the time it's lifestyle factors. It's obviously managing your stress, making sure that we're doing all that, switching off that stress response, because our bodies only have one evolutionary stress response, and that's our fight or flight. We all know, if we're being attacked by a lion, the fight or we're being mugged or something like that, the fight or flight response kicks in to enable the body to either fight the aggressor or run away. And that's, that was our evolutionary stress response. It's there to keep us alive. And, that it's a brilliant thing, a tool for our body to keep us safe. But in the old days, if we were being attacked by a lion and we got away, we'd go and sit in the cave and relax for a few more hours until the next danger came along. And that's not quite how modern life works, is it? So we don't get attacked by lions, but we have kind of these micro stresses all day long, and it's pretty unrelenting. So we're pretty switched on 24/7, and we don't get that rest time. We don't get to go back to the cave and go, "Phew, that was close. Let's have a little rest for a while." And that is the problem for cortisol, because instead of having these cortisol and adrenaline bursts, we have a constant level of cortisol going through our whole lives. And that is what's causing our health issues in a lot of situations. And it's also very, very bad for your other hormones because cortisol suppresses your hormones. So it knocks out your thyroid, and that knocks out your metabolism and your weight and your energy and your mood. It also has a massive impact on your sex hormones. So, when the body's in fight or flight, it's not going to worry about you, feeling sexy. or having a baby or anything like that, because it's shutting everything down. So cortisol has a big impact on your whole body. And when we're all stressed and busy and juggling, then it can have a big impact. So I actually think, obviously I'm a nutritionist, I look at your diet, but I actually think stress is actually more important to manage than your diet these days, because I think it has such a big effect on how you go through, how you deal with hormone imbalance, how actually causing them in the first place, but also how you go through perimenopause. The more stressed you are, probably the worse your journey is going to be. So I've seen a direct correlation in the women we've been helping.
And I think that's an important kind of statement that you've made there, is that a lot of us will probably be focusing on our diet, or know that we should be focusing on our diet, and may even cause ourselves stress trying to eat healthily. And actually what I'm hearing you say is the reduction of the stress is as important, if not more, than what we're eating as well.
I'm actually coming to the conclusion. I actually put in my happy hormone code, I've put diet first, but I'm actually thinking I should actually put stress first, because that, for me, after 6 years of working with women, seems to be the main influence in how hormones are working. So I've really looked at the order of things, and I think stress is absolutely the number one priority these days.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
So number 2 is thyroid. Now, your thyroid basically runs your whole body. So it's like a thermometer on the body. So when it's switched up, your body's going to work harder and kind of be more. Your metabolism's going to be higher. You're going to be jittery, anxious, kind of sweaty, palpitating, that kind of stuff. And then when it's switched down, which is much more common with women, you're going to be a bit more sluggish. Your brain's going to be foggy. Your energy's not going to be there. You might have a brilliant night of sleep, but you get up feeling unrefreshed. It will be really hard to lose weight when your thyroid is not working properly, because it runs your metabolism. So your metabolism is going to be slow. Thyroid also runs your cycle, so you can get more extreme PMS when your thyroid is low. And your hair could be falling out. You can feel cold because your temperature regulation's gone out the window as well. So thyroid is a really key one. And, we don't really get properly tested for our thyroid. So especially when you've had children. So I know a lot of your listeners are mums. And when we're pregnant, the baby takes a huge amount of your thyroid hormone to grow, because that's what thyroid does. It helps you grow and form properly. So the fetus takes, and the baby takes, a lot of your thyroid. And so when you've had gone through childbirth and you've had the baby, many of us are thyroid deficient, because we just run out, and it takes the body a little while to get that back. So in a lot of cases, postpartum depression, for instance, you've got a lot of fatigue after childbirth, and we put that down to the baby blues and having just had a baby, etc., and lack of sleep and all of that. But it's really important, if you're going through that, to get your thyroid properly checked, because in a lot of cases it's just low thyroid, and you may be given antidepressants or something like that, or other medications, when actually that's not what's happening. It could just be your low thyroid, in which case that's a completely different treatment.
I think that's brilliant, and that's a really, again, an important piece. I suffered with postpartum depletion, and had I have not had the expert support that I had had in place, I think it would have been, I was being told by the medical professional, you're just a new mum, this is just normal tiredness. And I knew in my body it wasn't. And it actually turned out to be adrenal fatigue. So I think, again, recognising that, as you say, these symptoms might be common, but they're not necessarily kind of normal.
Yeah, and stress as well has a huge impact on your thyroid. It suppresses it. So you can see how, the stress of maybe bringing a child into the world or being a new mum can actually make that whole thyroid situation worse as well. So when you do get asked, for testing, if you're wanting to go and do that, it's really important to get your T3 tested. So when you go to the doctors, they test your TSH and your T4, sometimes mostly your TSH. That's just your brain hormone. You have a whole thyroid pathway, and the active hormone, T3, they very rarely test. So that's the one for me that tells me if your thyroid's working or not. So when we run thyroid tests, we do the whole pathway. And we also look at your antibodies as well, because that's really important, because 80% of thyroid conditions are autoimmune. And that's nothing to do with your actual gland, that's to do with your immune system. So if the root cause is down in your immune system, that's your gut. So that's inflammation, and that's stuff going on in the gut. So that's where we're looking to resolve things and calm the immune system down. So very different ways of looking at thyroid conditions through when we look at it through our lens, and when you go to the doctors, it's a different story.
Brilliant. So we've talked about number 1's cortisol, number 2's thyroid. So what's number 3?
Number 3 is insulin. And, insulin, we know that regulates our blood sugar. So when we eat carbs or sugar, insulin is released to take that excess sugar out of blood, because obviously the sugar, we eat it and goes straight into the bloodstream, and we're only ever allowed a teaspoon of sugar in our blood, otherwise it gets very dangerous. And if you imagine a bag of chips from McDonald's, or a carton of chips from McDonald's is about 10 to 15 teaspoons, then, and if you just had that, if you had the burger and the Coke as well, we're talking about probably 20 to 30 teaspoons. And in that situation, the body goes into stress and it releases a lot of insulin, because that sugar needs to be taken straight out of the blood. And many people don't think of as bread or carbs or chips even as sugar, but it just it's long chains of sugar, and it just breaks down to sugar in the body. And so it acts just like sugar. So again, this is more sort of education about, we know sugar's bad, and we know kind of, high carb diets are bad, but we're not really sure of the link. But if you think of bread and potato and anything white pretty much as sugar, then it's easier to kind of see what can happen in the body. So when we release a lot of that insulin, then our blood sugar shoots up, insulin comes along to take it out of the blood, and then insulin takes the sugar along to your cells to use as energy. And the cell might be already full of sugar from the last meal you had. So it may just say, actually, do you know what? I don't need this sugar right now. Go and take it somewhere else. So insulin sort of kind of thinks, well, what am I going to do with it? I'm going to go and store it as fat for another time. And that's what insulin does. And that's why I call insulin your fat storing hormone, because that's what it's doing all day long. So the more insulin we produce, the more fat we store, pretty much. And that is why insulin, and also insulin can really mess with your sex hormones as well. It pushes up estrogen, it causes inflammation, causes long-term issues. So that's the whole reason we nutritionists bang on about your blood sugar and how you need to balance it, because of that insulin effect. And as long as you're eating, really, which I'll come on to, how to balance your blood sugar. But if your blood sugar is nice and balanced, you're going to have enough energy, your mood's going to be good, your weight's going to be managed because you're fat burning rather than storing. And long term, you're in a really good place as well. Oh, and it makes you sleep better too. So.
And I know all mums will be like, yes, I need some of that, as well as all that other brilliant stuff you've talked about.
And the last of the 5T4 is estrogen, which works very, very closely with progesterone. The two of them should be nicely in balance. And obviously, as you get towards perimenopause, progesterone declines more quickly than estrogen. And that's because you're not ovulating as much. So you may skip a few ovulations, depending on what your egg reserve. But at some point, your egg reserve is going to be depleted, and then you will just not ovulate anymore. And the progesterone only gets produced when you ovulate. So that's why progesterone can be very low as you go through perimenopause and beyond. And that puts the estrogen-progesterone ratio out of balance, because estrogen is declining, but not quite as steeply, and it also fluctuates a lot, estrogen. So that's what can cause the kind of crazy swing between over lots of estrogen and none at all. So high levels of estrogen, you've got, PMS, you've got mood swings, you've got emotional stuff, you've got bloating and water retention and all of that, headaches maybe. And then the low estrogen signs are things like hot flushes and night sweats, dryness, wrinkles, again, headaches, more headache, joint pain, things don't get, and skin issues, things aren't lubricated very well, and your brain, and insomnia as well, sleep issues. So you could be swaying between the two because estrogen's going up and down quite a bit. But normally post-menopausal thing, your estrogen and progesterone kind of settle down, but that's when they can become too low. So again, just because you go through the menopause without any problems, it doesn't mean that you're out of the woods, because your hormones may settle in a place where it doesn't make you feel great. So again, we get a lot of clients who go through the menopause and then come back to us and say, you know what, I'm still not right, or I'm not right, I don't feel good, because their hormones have settled in a very low position, or they're again, cortisol is having an impact. So very much depends on what that woman has gone through and how her hormones have kind of settled down. But that's the feisty four in essence.
And it is incredibly fascinating. And I think you've put that across, you've articulated that brilliantly, Nikki, because it can be quite a complex and scientific thing that you've made really easily understandable. So can I just say, you were saying that during perimenopause, your progesterone can lower. So does that mean that some women get an estrogen dominance at that point?
Yes, exactly. And that can look like, all the estrogen dominance symptoms, PMS and bloating and headaches and mood swings.
And I think that's really, again, useful just to emphasize there, because I think, again, many women like myself will think, oh, I'm just irritable because I'm stressed and I'm juggling too much, which we might be. But actually, there might be something underlying that is amplifying it.
Yeah, and your liver has a big role to play as well, because when your estrogen's all over the place relating to progesterone, your liver has to clear your excess estrogen away. And, if we're drinking too much, or we've got a lot of chemicals around us, or just as we age, liver gets a bit sluggish because it's got a lot to deal with these days, pollution and all the rest of it. Then if your liver's backing up a little bit, that can have an effect on your estrogen clearance, and then we just get the estrogen recirculating, and that means we get more estrogen in the body, and that can again have those dominant effects. So there's a lot going on, but if we look after our various systems, then we're in a much better place.
Brilliant, thank you. So again, your work is all about taking back control of your hormones. And I know you talk about concentrating on the major influences that disrupt them. So can you share a bit more about these disruptors, please?
Yeah, so I call them the 4 hormone disruptors. So we've got the feisty 4, and now we're coming on to the 4 disruptors. And they're in 4 categories. So food, stress, environment, and lifestyle. And the first one is food. So there are... I kind of sort of categorize foods into hormone-friendly foods and hormone-disrupting foods, and it just makes it easier to kind of see food in a slightly different way. So I don't look at calories, and I recommend people don't look at calories, because food is actually information, and it sends a message. When you eat something, it sends a message. So I'll give you a classic example of the avocado versus the Krispy Kreme donut. Right, the avocado has actually about 400 calories in a large avocado. And I still hear women saying, I don't really eat a lot of avocado because there's so many calories in it. Right? And then the Krispy Kreme donut, actually the average Krispy Kreme donut has 200 in it. So if we were on a calorie-controlled diet, in theory, we'd go for the donut, right? We all know, we're all intelligent beings, that actually doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's because the nutrients in the avocado has a totally different message for your body than, I won't say nutrients in the donut. There's nothing in there, empty calories, but there's no nutrients in there. But whatever's in there, the flour and the sugar has a totally different message to your body. So the nutrients in the avocado will be telling your body to increase your metabolism, to burn fat, to supply all your cells with the nutrients they need, the fats, the healthy fats. And the donut will be telling your body to seize up, fight or flight. This is a stressful thing we're eating. It's not doing anything for anything. It's not supplying any nutrients. So you can see the difference between looking at calories and looking at nutrients and information. And that's what, so the disruptors, food disruptors are things like, sugar, the refined carbs, the trans fats, the vegetable oils, the margarines and spreads. So if you just take one little nugget from this talk, please ditch your margarine and your spreads. They're full of vegetable oil. Now, when vegetable oils are heated and treated and processed, they turn into trans fats, and your body does not know what to do with those. They're not natural fats at all. So your body treats them as a bit of a stress. So it has to deal with that stuff. And we don't want the body to be dealing with stuff when we've already got a lot of stuff to deal with. So let's take that burden off your body and just give it natural fats. So just go and eat butter. It's really nutritious. It's got loads of vitamin A in it. It's got all the healthy fats. Your body knows what to do with it. It's very stable. It doesn't just denature. And just, that's what real food is. So that's why it's so valuable, because its nature is real food. We've got to stay away from the processed and the packaged stuff, because the body knows what to do with real food. It knows what those nutrients are saying to it. It's got the right message, if you like. When we're processing foods and it's kind of, we're eating all this fake stuff, the body doesn't know what to do with it. It's got chemicals in it. It's got additives. I also warn people who are going vegan as well to stay away from those processed vegan foods, because you might be thinking you're doing yourself a favor going vegan, but then if you start eating that fake meat and fake cheese and all that stuff, it's really not going to do your body any favors at all. So that's just a little bit of a sidetrack, but
but I think this is really important, because you're giving us the common sense reason behind this, because we may have heard some of this and kind of, as you say, we're all intelligent women that are listening to this. So you're probably, we know what we should be eating, but you're actually giving us the why of why it's so important.
Yeah. And, if you have enough, we have enough stress in our life. We don't want to be adding stress to our bodies by eating those kind of foods. That's the thing. If we can just take that level of stress off, then the body has less cortisol running around, because all that stuff will raise cortisol. And, I've just mentioned how bad cortisol is for your whole hormone experience. So take the stress off your food, take the stresses out, and then the body has one less thing to deal with. Right?
And I've got a question with regards to the food, actually, in terms of caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not necessarily a food, but it's nutrition, it's what we're putting into our body. Yeah. I'm assuming that, because I'm just thinking of my own experience as a working mum. When I'm tired, I reach for the caffeine. When I'm stressed, I tend to want to go for sugar. I want some chocolate, or I want a glass of wine at the end of the day, which I'm imagining all of those things are the disruptors.
Do you know what? I haven't put coffee in my disrupting list, actually.
This is. I'm intrigued to hear this.
Okay, firstly, I'm a huge fan. I'm a complete coffee nut. I love my coffee. But secondly, because coffee and caffeine, it'll completely depend on a few things if it's going to disrupt you or not. So it's not a clear-cut situation. It's not black or white, if I'm going to use that pun.
I love my coffee, so this is what I'm intrigued to hear.
Right. Well, there are some caveats. Okay. So because we all have different genetic makeups, right? So we have a gene that detoxifies caffeine. And you'll know whether you're you're a fast or a slow detoxifier. If you're a fast detoxifier of caffeine, you can drink a double espresso before you go to bed and you will not be affected. I'd say most Italians probably like that, because that's, okay, yeah. It must be an Italian gene or something, but my Italian friend can literally drink a couple and she's fine. Now, if I can't do that, but and many people can't do that, and some people actually can't even have one coffee before they get jittery, anxious. It affects their sleep, etc. So if that's you are a slow detoxifier, and we have a gene for this, like I said. So you can't change that; it's genetic. So if you are a slow detoxifier of caffeine and you get those symptoms pretty quickly, or your sleep is affected, whatever, you need to cut down, because that's not going to change the way you metabolize caffeine, right? So you're going to have to go decaf or switch to a different type of drink. If you're a fast detoxifier, it means your body deals with caffeine really, really fine, and it's good. And actually, the coffee bean is so good for us. It's full of antioxidants. And if we drink real fresh coffee, and not instant processed, but as fresh as possible, as good quality as possible, and you deal with coffee fine and caffeine, then you're fine. And actually, the studies that have been done recently are showing some huge health benefits from drinking coffee. So and that's from the antioxidants. So I think it helps with diabetes, with heart health, with brain function, with insulin sensitivity, weight sometimes as well. So there's a lot of benefits from coffee, but the real trick is to not drink it if you have any symptoms, because if you have anxiety, for instance, or you don't sleep well, or you get jittery, you need to be staying away from it, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. So we've talked about kind of the food and caffeine there. What are the other disruptors?
Oh, I didn't mention alcohol, did I?
No, yes.
That's my other big love. I have 3 big loves, and I nearly got thrown out of nutrition college for them. So it's coffee, wine, and chocolate. So they were definitely on the no-no list when I started studying. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know if this job's going to be for me. If I have to give those, it's not going to work. So, I still got them in my life, as I can't do without them, but I go as healthy as possible on all 3. So coffee, I've talked about. Alcohol, there is no good news about alcohol, unfortunately. Even if you drink, red wine for the resveratrol and the antioxidants in it. It's probably the most healthy form of alcohol, but even then, it's pretty bad for us women. It just raises our risk of breast cancer. So, you have to pick your kind of evils, I think. None of us are perfect, and I will have the odd glass of red wine and really enjoy it. And, there are other probably worse things you can do, but there is no good news about the alcohol, I'm afraid, especially if you don't sleep well or you have anxiety or mood issues. Then dry January is going to probably be your friend. So that's the alcohol. Chocolate's great if you're over 70%. So again, the cocoa bean has a similar kind of antioxidant profile to the coffee bean. So it's a really good source of that, and it's a really good source of magnesium. So when often people say to me, "Oh, I've got a chocolate craving," or I absolutely crave chocolate, I'm wondering whether it's actually the body telling you need some magnesium, because most women are magnesium deficient because you can only really get it from dark green leafy veg and a bit in nuts and seeds, and we're just not eating enough dark green leafy veg, most of us. And magnesium gets very, very quickly depleted when we're stressed. So most of us women are magnesium deficient. So that if that's the only supplement you go on, then definitely be taking some magnesium. So often if you've got chocolate cravings, try the magnesium and see if that makes a difference.
Brilliant. And if not, the darker the chocolate, the better.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, great. So what are some of the other disruptors then?
So I've talked about stress being a major one, so I won't go on about that. Sleep, again, lack of sleep, huge stress on the body and massively disrupting to your hormones. So not only is it going to affect your energy the next day and your mood, but sleep is when the body detoxifies and heals and restores itself and rejuvenates. And if that's not happening on a day-to-day basis, you're at increased risk of chronic disease down the line. It's that important. So, prioritizing your sleep. It's hard when you're a mom, I know that, but getting those naps in wherever you can really should be a priority. So just try and catch up whenever you can. And then environment is a huge topic. I haven't got time to go into that now, but we have a lot of chemicals around us that really stress out our hormones, and they have a title, endocrine disrupting chemicals. They are studied hugely in the science world for their effects on your hormones, and they are things like I'll just give you three, which are the main ones for me: BPA in plastic, pesticides on organic or non-organic food and veg, so anything you're eating where you're eating the skins. So don't worry too much about things like onions or bananas or things where you don't eat the skin. But if you're eating apples or berries or salad leaves, try and go for organic, because those pesticides can really mess with your hormones. They act like estrogen, and that's why they're endocrine disrupting. And the third one is the really popular one is I'm joking, is synthetic fragrances. So, and they are everywhere. They're in your shampoo, they're in your body lotion, they're in your candles, they're in your air fresheners. The less of that stuff you can use, the better. But and also, just trying to switch to more natural brands made with essential oils rather than synthetic fragrances, because these things, when we're breathing in those candle scents, you're inhaling it. When you inhale something, it goes straight into the bloodstream. So those group of chemicals called phthalates are in these scented candles or in air fresheners, so cleaning products, and you just inhale them, and it's the quickest way to get into the bloodstream, and they really do cause havoc to hormones. So I've had people come to us with migraines, and I said, do you actually what have you got lying around the house? And she said, oh yeah, I burn about 10 different scented candles, the house smells amazing. And I go, right, okay, let's just try a week, let's just get rid of those for a week, don't light anything, and lo and behold, the migraines go away. So
because I know many women listening, and I think there's particular women that we might follow on social media around cleaning that are big proponents of kind of candles and cleaning products. So if you were buying candles, what company or brand do you go towards?
So good candles, they are a little bit more expensive because they're not as proliferant. Is that the word? Proliferant? Whatever.
So they use more expensive ingredients because they're better quality ingredients as well.
Yeah, and essential oils tend to be more expensive than these synthetic stuff. So I'm a massive fan of companies like Neom. Who are the other ones that candles? They're the only sort of candles I buy actually. But there are lots of lovely natural brands that you can actually, if you go to a website called biggreensmile.com, they've got all sorts of natural alternatives to the main brands, and you can kind of shop around and just try things. I say to people, just don't worry, don't throw everything out and replace it, because that's crazy. But just when you come to the end of a product, you just think, oh, would there be a more natural brand around, and just go and have a look around and maybe try a few natural things when you come to the end of stuff. I mean, cleaning products are the easiest to do because you can get those in your supermarkets. And, Method is one of my favourite brands because they state on their website they don't use phthalates, those synthetic fragrances. So that would be a good start.
I'll put a link to all of these in the show notes for people. So that was the biggreensmile.com website and Method Cleaning. So great.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then the last disruptor is lifestyle, and that's to do with mostly exercise and sitting. We sit a lot, so we want to just make sure that we're moving more. And we don't have to be doing intense exercise. Actually, that's probably really bad for your hormones, because the more intense it is, the more cortisol it raises. So we want to be making sure, especially if we're already stressed, we don't want to stress the body out too much. So often, if you're going through perimenopause and you're particularly stressed, it's often much more beneficial to slow down and do things like yoga and Pilates and walking. Walking is very underrated, and more gentle, weights or resistance, but not intense, crazy boot camps and stuff like that, because often that just stresses the body out more. It's not for everyone. Everybody's going to be different to that. Some people may find that very relaxing. I don't know. I'm just talking about me here, but I need to do that kind of class is good for me.
Regular listeners of my podcast may remember one of my first few podcasts. I interviewed my very good friend, a lady called Beth Gardner, who's a women's physical health kind of specialist.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about kind of working out versus working in, and of course all movement should be good for you, but as you say, when we're stressed, working out can stress an already overloaded system, and working in something that replenishes and actually gives us more energy, like the yoga, the Pilates, the walking. And I really love that differentiator, because it's something I've had to focus on in my own life.
Absolutely. It's really important that we don't just put more stress on our bodies when the body's just desperate for you to slow down and rest.
Brilliant. So I know that several people had asked me. I said I was doing this interview with you, and they were really, really excited, because I think it's an issue that many of us experience. They asked, in terms of our nutrition, are there particular foods that we should be eating at different times in our cycle, or are we just talking about whole natural foods as much as possible across the whole cycle?
Well, there is this thing called seed cycling, and I think the more seeds we eat, the better, because they're so nutrient dense and they're easy to put on things, and they're just easy, and they've got such a variety of nutrients in them. So I love all seeds, but the seed cycling thing is interesting. I don't. Obviously, it's not something that's been researched or clinically trialed or anything like that. But the idea is that you have pumpkin and flax seeds as the two seeds in the first 2 weeks of your cycle, and then sesame and sunflower in the second 2 weeks. But actually, for me, I think you should be eating these kind of seeds all the time. So I would just mix them up. I don't see the real benefit of having them in different times of your cycle, because, yes, they have certain nutrients in them that are useful. But things like sunflower has selenium in them, which helps your body detox hormones. But at the same time, you need selenium for all kinds of things. So don't just restrict it to the second half of your cycle. I would be eating all 4 of those seeds, and I'd be adding in chia and hemp seeds as well. And then you've got 6 lovely seeds there. Get a mixed packet. I was in Lidl the other day, and they do amazing mixed ground seeds. All of these were included. Flax seeds in particular are the most important, because they have something called lignans in them. So they are phytoestrogens. So phytoestrogens are plant-based estrogens, but they're not actually estrogen, but they act a bit like estrogen. So what they do is they're adaptogens. So they go in and they help the body balance out your estrogen, particularly helpful during perimenopause and menopause, because they help to kind of regulate that fluctuating estrogen. So flax seeds are really good, and they're also full of fibre, so they help you if you've got any digestive issues as well. So that would be my absolute go-to, and then chia seeds would be next, and then all of the others. But get some of these mixed packets and just liberally throw them over everything.
So you would put them, I suppose, on porridge, in a salad?
Yeah, yogurts, over your salads and your soups, and you chuck them in anything you're eating, really. They're pretty tasteless, most of them. So you can actually just ground them up and throw them in. And I'd say, 1 to 2 tablespoons a day would be.
Yeah. And I think, again, as busy working mums, we can overwhelm ourselves and beat us up with this long line of to-do list. I need to meditate 20 minutes a day, and I need to, make homemade organic food all the time. And so I think it's great that you're going, actually, if you do one thing listening to this, it's, look at your magnesium and look at adding some seeds into your diet.
Seeds from Lidl, yeah.
And I'm intrigued because you've talked about magnesium over vitamin D, and I don't know, do you feel that magnesium is more important for people to look at than their vitamin D?
Oh, no, I never said that. No, I haven't looked at vitamin D yet. So vitamin D is incredibly important. So I have a top 5 supplement list for anyone, to be honest. The first one, do you want me to go through them?
If you're willing to share, that would be amazing.
Absolutely. So the first one is a multivitamin that just covers your bases, but it's not just any old multivit. We don't want the cheap rubbish ones from Boots or whatever, or the ones that have the big marketing budgets behind them, because they don't have, a lot of them don't, they're very cheap. They have fillers in them. They have the wrong forms of the vitamins. They're not very bioavailable. To be honest, those are the ones they do those studies on, the media headlines that come out and say, vitamins are useless, because they're doing those studies on these really cheap, crappy ones. So don't waste your money on those. I've got a couple of really good brands. Nutria do a fantastic multivitamin for women. It's their 1 a day essential for women. I think it's called Nutri Advanced is the company. And that's the one we recommend for most women, because it's just 1 tablet a day and it covers all your bases. It gives you enough B vitamins as well in their active forms. You don't have to take a B complex. Everything is in there. It's got all your minerals in there as well. It's got a little bit of vitamin D as well, but you need extra vitamin D through the winter. So that's a multivitamin. The next one is vitamin D. I would always take vitamin D with vitamin K2, because that's what helps make vitamin D work really well. And you can get sprays now with vitamin D and K2, and you can get drops. You can get, my favourite brand is by Cytoplan, CYTO Plan, and we put that in the notes as well. Vitamin D and K2 they do. And you'll need to take at least 2,000 IU a day during the winter, because we don't get any sunshine in the winter. So you're not going to get any vitamin D from around about September through to May in this country. And vitamin D deficiency is rife. We really need vitamin D for our brains. Low vitamin D can cause depression. So again, it could be another just simple remedy. And vitamin D is absolutely critical for your bones, but it's also your main immune system regulator. So, all these people getting ill over the winter, I can bet you that their vitamin D is low, because I've had, I've been taking 4,000 or 5,000 IU a day all the way through the winter. My levels are through the roof, and they're in a good way. But I touch wood, I haven't been ill yet, so I'm kind of putting it down to that. But who knows? Number 3 is vitamin C. Again, depleted very quickly when we're stressed, and again through the winter, it's our immune system protector. It's a major antioxidant as well. We really need vitamin C, and many of us are deficient in that. The next one is magnesium. I mentioned that already. Magnesium citrate is a good one if you are a little bit constipated as well. That helps to relax the bowel. If you aren't constipated and have the other thing, loose stools, then you probably want to stay away from that and go for magnesium oxide or magnesium bisglycinate. And then the next one is fish oil, and not just any old fish oil as well. This one's really important to buy a good brand and good quality, because they can get rancid very quickly. And there's a lot of dodgy brands of fish oil out there. So we're looking for really good sources of EPA and DHA. Your brain and your hormones absolutely need loads of this stuff. So you need a good, 800 milligrams to 1,000 of the balance of those two per day. And they line your cells. They're good for your brain. They're good for your heart, good for your skin. Pretty much they do, hundreds of things in the body that they do. So really important to have that. And unless you're having 3 to 5 portions of oily fish a week, you're going to be deficient in omega-3. So really important to get that.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'll put all the notes into the show notes for everybody. But I think that, that's incredibly important advice that you're giving there that most of us won't necessarily even know about. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So, if there was just one thing that somebody listening to this takes away from this conversation, because you've shared so many brilliant things, Nikki, what would you hope that one thing is?
I would say get help and don't put up with your symptoms, because there's absolutely no reason for you to have symptoms that you need to endure for a long time. Because we should, especially if you're younger, if you're in your 20s and 30s and early 40s even, well, all the way through, it doesn't matter how old you are, but, we should not be. Symptoms are a sign that things are out of balance, and you need to really get to the bottom of it and address it as soon as possible. Because also, if you leave hormone imbalances, they'll just put you more at risk of future stuff as you get older. So we really want to get on top of it now, and that'll put you in a really good position going forward.
Brilliant. And I know you've got some amazing resources out there. So where can people find out more about you, your work, and all these resources that you've got?
Yeah, the website is probably the first place to start. So it's happyhormonesforlife.com, and from there you can pretty much go into there's a book, my book as well. If that's everything we've talked about today in much more detail, with recipes and resources and all of that. And I think it's around £10 on Amazon at the moment. So the book's called "It's Not You, It's Your Hormones," and we'll put a link in, I'm sure, for that as well. It's a very easy read. Hopefully I'm explaining kind of quite complex stuff in a very simple way that people can understand, and it has got a lot of tools and tips in there as well. So that would be the first port of call, I think. And then we've got a Facebook group, we've got a podcast just about to launch, and a free hormone balancing guide. Actually, that's probably, if you're over 35. The guide is aimed at sort of over 35, 40s, and that's a free download, and it comes with lots of videos as well. So lots of stuff that you can consume.
Great, and I will put all of that in the show notes, and I would really encourage anybody listening to go over to Nikki's website, get signed up to your emails, because I think the resources that you share, your free content alone is incredibly valuable. And I know that you do kind of really detailed testing with people, so if anybody listening,
we do, and also we do offer a free discovery calls, 30 minutes calls, for anybody wanting to know more about the testing that we do as well, because we do comprehensive hormone, gut, nutrient testing that really gets to the root cause of what's going on, and that's the fastest way to get results. So do book in a call if you're interested in that.
Well, Nikki, honestly, you've shared so many amazing things, and I'm hoping that everybody listening is just as blown away as I am, because you've shared incredibly generously there. So thank you.
You're so welcome. It's been a total pleasure.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too. So if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.